Hello, welcome to another episode of Fix It Tony. Today we are going to undertake a multi-day, multi-project. It's going to involve disassembling a lot of things. I have to remove this cover plate, which is covering my fuel injector rail. I have to remove my air intake, which is this whole thing. There's a clamp that I have to unscrew down there, and that's accessible probably from underneath the manifold through an extension. And I have these covers here. This cover here will reveal my spark plugs, my ignition coils, and my spark plug wires, and additional bolts that are holding down this valve cover gasket. I'm probably going to have to remove this thing here to allow me to get access to the back of the engine compartment. I will have to remove my mass airflow sensor and disconnect that and tuck away the wires. Plastic is brittle on these older cars, and on any car really that's in the engine compartment. So just being very careful on how you remove your plastic parts. And we will begin with basic disassembly. Now, because I'm going to be leaving things uncovered, I'll be covering things and protecting them with like plastic bags and other things to keep things from getting contaminated. I don't want to have anything falling into the engine, so that's very important to keep in mind. Okay, let's begin. Or not spins, it unscrews. So this connector unscrews by grabbing these grips and turning it a quarter turn. And I'm just going to put that somewhere out of the way. Now I'll be removing my air filter. Because I recently put a new air filter in, I don't want this just to be exposed and open. So I'm going to be very careful. So my cover is going to go in a plastic bin, and along with my filter, I'm going to put that in a plastic bin. The next thing I'm going to disconnect is this air sensor. There we go. Ooh, this looks very delicate. Whenever you're taking something apart, assume it's brittle, assume it's delicate. So when I remove this, it looks like there's an important sensor in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to protect this as best I can. So I'm going to wrap it in a plastic bag, and then I'm going to wrap it and protect it. And it's going to be off to the side. Prior to removing this plenum or this air intake bridge that contains the mass airflow sensor, it's held in place with two nuts on the back, and it just so happens it is 10 millimeters. I'll be putting the nuts and bolts also in the plastic bin. I do not want to have anything falling down my engine compartment, so be careful, be patient, and be slow. Looks like a washer is built in to the nut. The dangerous part is rushing and then losing your tools or your materials. Again, one more thing I need to do is get at this particular nut for this clamp. Now, I could go from underneath here. I just have to see if I have a couple extensions and that might be the easiest. And I'm going to remember that is the orientation for easier reassembly. And then I believe everything should come out thereafter. 8mm is it. Okay, that looks loose enough. Remove my tool, place my tool down somewhere, and lift. Now it's going to be stuck there. There, I lifted up. The gasket stayed behind. And if I look inside there, it's coated with something kind of gross. Now, this is open to the air, and that's gonna be where there's like the air goes in there, right? So I don't want to have any debris going in there. So I'm gonna get another plastic bag that I'm gonna try and see if it fits. And what I'm gonna do as well is I'm gonna go get a rubber band later and put a rubber band around that. So now I have things that are important protected. Well, this is actually 5mm hex. Let's see if I can undo it with my nut driver. Oh yeah. Oh, that was loose. That was loose. That was loose. And you can see how that could be in the way. This may still be too high. Yeah, you see? It's too high. Now another option is I have a Allen wrench with a short elbow. And that nut back there is loose. One of the important tips that I've seen is I'm going to draw an outline, and then I'm going to draw the cover, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like there's a there. Just had to go straight up. I got the cover off, and let's take a look at what we have. We have what looks to be original ignition coils, wouldn't you think? Zunspool. So 1, 2, 3 ignition coils. These are my spark plug wires. So I'll be pulling all that out. What I might do is pull the negative battery terminal off the battery just so that there's no electricity going to the coils. And I'll be wearing rubber gloves too. All right, making progress. I'll be replacing my ignition coils. This is an ignition coil here, 1, 2, 3. And each ignition coil does provide the spark power to 2 of the cylinders and spark plugs. These look original, so that means they look in good shape, but I don't know if they'll last much longer because it is unpredictable. I don't think I'm having any problems right now with my spark. I'm very satisfied with how things are running, but I have everything apart, and I just want to make sure that I have everything new here going forward. And I'm going to save these because if there's ever a problem with my other coils, which I trust new coils won't last as long, I'll at least have a replacement and go back to the old coil. So the way these fit in is as I was removing the wiring harness, there were plugs that were plugging from the wiring harness, which comes from the car's electrical system to actually feed electricity into the coils. That's what this one, I have these covered in orange tape, so I know. And it's pretty straightforward. These two are close together and they're facing in opposite directions, and it's consistent with how these coils go in. It's important to note how these coils are going in. You can see that the labels can be upside down, so it's not really an issue of make sure they go in not all in the same label, but in the correct format. And the way you know whether or not it's correct is I'm going to pull the first one out. I first disconnected the power from the engine, so I know there's no electricity now in this whole system. And it's about lifting straight up, with a little bit of jiggle, and it's going to have resistance to it. And I'm going to unplug this one, and I want to point out to you that there are 4 holes. The coils are not being held in place, at least on my model, with any screws. There is a brass spring contact, and you'll notice that on every one of these locations, there's a peg. One peg is going to be painted. The other peg is going to be sort of threaded. When it comes to the coil, this part attaches to the spark plug down here. And if I look down in here, you know, it's got some corrosion and it's pretty dry. And as I pull it out, it doesn't feel like I have a good, strong connection. This just pops right out. And that's kind of what the coil would look like when you get it in the box. And I'm gonna be replacing these as well with the new coil, so everything is fresh and new. Be mindful that sometimes people say, oh, there's lots of oil around these tips. If that's the case, then we know that the gasket that seals the cover to the cylinder head is failed, and then oil is sort of dripping down in. We do not want to see oil on this at all. So the orientation of this will be important because we got to match this little brass connector with this post. The other thing I'm going to keep in mind is how the wires are routed. So this particular plug cover comes out, and you know, it's got some corrosion in there, and the springs seem to have been pretty good. No oil. This was actually sitting on top, so then I take that off and I'm going to work my way backwards. So cylinder 1, cylinder 2. So you got to be careful. You see pieces of plastic and other types of material are breaking off. Then the next cylinder 2 cable is then released, and it's sitting on top of cylinder 1 cable. Cylinder 2 cable goes all the way back to cylinder 5. So I'll pull that out. And this is dry as well, so that's good. And it wasn't in very good. but you'll notice the length of the cables and how they're stacked is going to be important. All right, so I'm going to pull out cylinder 3. Cylinder 3 is still sitting on the cylinder 1 cable. So the cylinder 1 cable was sitting down flat. And we got something broken here. That looks like it was a clip that helped to keep everything tight. All right, so the second ignition coil that sits at cylinder 4 also connects cylinder 3. This one has more oil in it. We've had some oil penetration into cylinder 4, and that post that I was talking about that's conductive, it is on cylinder 4, but it's on the opposite direction. So keep in mind that little brass tab is going to go that way. You're going to see that I got a lot of dirt and debris in there. Let's take a look. I'm going to get in closer for you, okay? You can see all that dirt and residue. We don't want that. That's oil that's leaking subtly. That's got to be dry. It's all going to be clean. I'm not going to use a shop towel because that generates too much lint. Okay, so it's not critical for the process of spark plug removal. But what is critical is cleaning inside the cavity where the spark plug is at the bottom. That is part of the top of the head, and that's going to need to be cleaned before I remove anything because I don't want to have anything fall into the cylinder. So the first thing I'm going to do is blow out with an air gun. I'll be cleaning with a more durable and lint-free, lint-resistant cloth inside of the tubes. And I'll also be using these lint-resistant or lint-free large swabs to soak up the oil that's in there, and I'll be using a cleaner to help clean up and absorb the oil. Clearly some are dirtier than others. If I just kind of curiously wipe. So I can't get all the way around the bottom of the spark plug, so I'm gonna do that after I pull the spark plug. You can see that. Ooh, that's really, let me see if I could show you. There. So, let's see here. You can kind of see, there, that's cylinder 1, clean. Cylinder 2, you can see how it's clean. Cylinder 3, you can see how that's kind of dirty. Cylinder 4, you can see how it's caked on down there. Cylinder 5, not too bad, but still something. And cylinder 6, not bad. So you can kind of see how the oil does find its way down in there. And that's what we're going to try to clean up. Next up, I'm going to try to crack all of the spark plugs. I got a spark plug, 16 millimeter for my specific spark plug. It's got a magnetic holder. It's pivot as well, because I want to make sure I approach at the right angle, and because it's deep, I do have an extension, and I'm going to do my best. These are supposed to be torqued to a certain value. The other thing is sometimes they put anti-seize compound, but I've heard on videos and read on blogs that the people put too much anti-seize compound. It could ruin the spark plug. Spark plugs don't need anti-seize compound, recommended not to. at least when I was reading my manual. So I'm going to start seeing if I could loosen up my That's pretty good. Let's see this one. I'm not taking it out completely. That's not tight. That's good. Sometimes. Oh, wow. All right. All right, so that's all good news. These old cars and these old engines need the spark plugs that were available back when the cars were made. There is a temptation to use a new spark plug with the fancy iridium and platinum, but the recommendation is to go with your very simple copper-based electrode spark plug. These are pre-gapped. For my particular car, an M104 engine, 1994 C280 6-cylinder F8 DC4 is the copper electrode that I believe is the best one for this particular car. The box on the spark plug says 28 Newton meters. My torque wrench, I can get it as close as 27.8 or 28.4. So I'm going to do 28.4. There, picked it up. So let's take a look at this spark plug. Doesn't look bad, right? There's no char on it. You can see some of the oil never made it past, so the threads aren't soaked with oil. So that's good. I haven't had an oil burning situation. You can see where the contact was. Now we can actually read this. This is, it's full of oil. Let's see if I can clean it off. This says F8 DC4, Germany 988. So this particular plug was made in Germany. Of course, it has the Mercedes logo on it. So the owner probably went to the dealer and got the original OEM, but mine is also F8 DC4, but mine was made in Russia. I did buy these large cotton swabs. The kind that I got is, interestingly, for cleaning dog ears, 100 pieces, cotton. All right, let's give you a peek down in there. Let's see if you can see. That's how clean I want it to be before I put the spark plug back in. I'm finger tightening. As a matter of technique, what I do with my torque wrench is I do a couple of clicks and then tightening it, and I do that like 3 or 4 times to make sure that I'm confident that I've achieved the right torque setting. I fold it over, back, and rerouted this wiring harness, and trying to get that back into the channel in which it came. Okay, that is in. Oop, I forgot. I need to pull this back out. I see an orange piece of tape, and that is my fuel injector for cylinder 1. So, good thing for orange tape, right? There, that's connected. Now I can drop my wiring harness back in. Across this little crevice is a bridge. This rubber insulating whatever contains the wires for my ignition coils. So I'm just plugging in my ignition coils. There, that's all plugged in. My wiring harness is back in. I had to tidy up my insulation back here. I'll continue to tinker with it. Looks like I lost a plug. I got one of those extras, so I'm not too worried. I'll fix that. So I put everything back together. I spared you having to watch that part. My only dilemma that I'm gonna have to troubleshoot is my cover is warped. I'm going to now reconnect the battery and try starting it.